Here we are. Ah, this breath of fresh air. Michaela, how you doing?
Fantastic. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for asking. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? First of all, thank you for joining us. It's a beautiful day here in Toronto. What's it like by you, Michaela?
Actually, a beautiful day in New Hampshire. Had a little bit of a rainy summer, so this is great.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'd like to know where everyone's joining us from. So if you want to drop in your little flag emoji in the chat, we'd love to get an idea of, who you are, where you're coming from, what country you're representing, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we want to welcome you all. Welcome to Sold in 6 Seconds. It's a little conversation that I'm having with my partner in crime or in performance. I'll introduce her in a hot second. But we're here to talk about formulas to fast and friction-free e-commerce. My name is Henri, and once again, I'm joined by my partner in performance, Michaela. Michaela, how you doing?
Great. Thank you. Yeah. So today we're going to have a fun discussion around web performance and e-commerce this back to school season. As you know, consumers demand speed, and you got to make sure that your website's able to pass that test.
Absolutely. It's going to be a very important chat. We want to make sure that you have superb user experiences so that you can, what we like to call, secure the bag. That's why, website experiences are very important. And in fact, when it comes to website experience, I know, Michaela, you like to have these conversations with some of your clients.
Yeah, so I have a lot of calls with Catchpoint web page test users. So we're all using websites every single day. We know what a good experience feels like, and I'm sure you know what a poor experience feels like too. So changes in performance are going to impact your search engine ranking, your retention of users, converting of customers. So website experience is absolutely critical to increasing your revenue and avoiding reputational damage to your brand.
Absolutely. And, in today's conversation, it's really going to be e-commerce and e-commerce really as a priority. Now, for those who may or may not know, last year in 2022, we had actually about 20% of global retail sales were e-com. Basically, everything was online. And, some say, the figure could be attributed to, several reasons. One of them being the sort of tail end of the peak of COVID-19, which was a bit of an accelerant when it came to getting online and the e-commerce and that space in general. Ain't that right, Michaela?
Yeah, not only did we shop a little bit more online because it was safer than going in a store, it even made certain like grocery stores, retailers have the ability to order things online and have it delivered directly to your car in a parking lot. So we're relying on the internet even more than we were before, if that's even possible.
Tell me about it. But yeah, we're talking about back to school though.
Yes, when I'm thinking of back to school, I almost find myself in first grade going to an office supply store with my mom, buying some notebooks and pencils. But realistically, it's a whole lot more than that. There's college students that are going back to school. They need to get things for their dorm, maybe new laptops, books. Everybody's looking for new clothes, got to look spiffy on that first day back. So there's a lot of revenue coming in for a lot of different types of businesses. And it's up to you to make sure that your website is ready for all of those users.
Absolutely. And, we had some great data when it came to back to school in general.
Yeah, so back to school spending is expected to exceed $30 billion in 2023. That's billion with a B, Henri. That's a lot of money on the table.
It is. It is.
50% of shoppers are favoring online retailers, and 56% of shoppers are going to do the majority of their shopping online. I personally can tell that. I definitely spend more time online shopping than walking through a mall. So that means fashion, luxury, office supply stores. It's going to be a priority for everybody across the board.
Yep, absolutely. And when it comes to, you talked about fashion and whatnot, it's really interesting because, footwear is a huge category, and it's actually, often seen as like apparel, potentially fashion, because I don't know, Louis Vuitton does shoes. But, ultimately, it's such a big category that some believe that it needs its own category, period. Like footwear should be a separate category. And here we can see that Foot Locker, who is very strong in e-commerce, and they have a dedicated presence. And in 2021, they achieved almost 30% of their sales online as digital sales, and that hit $2 billion. That's 2 billion with a B, folks. And that's a lot of Air Jordans, to tell the truth. Well, maybe not actually, because Jordans are kind of pricey. But either way, they do have a very strong presence. And in fact, we have this, Mark Powell, who's a senior sort of like sports advisor, mentioned that, Foot Locker have a very well developed platform, e-commerce. And these are very important notes because in order to have a good experience online, good sales, have people check out, you want to make sure that you look after your e-commerce platform. Now, speaking of platforms, I wanted to look at some data, and I pulled out some sort of performance and user experience data on four well-known platforms here. Now, what we're looking at is these four platforms, and you'll see the blue line, which is sort of like the Core Web Vitals average on the internet. And we can see three of the four platforms are not supplying a good user experience and or are not performant. But we do see one in particular, which is the pink line, and that is a ecom platform that Michaela and I know very well. And in fact, you can see they are head and shoulders not only above the average, but also above the other three platforms. Now, you might ask yourself, why is that? Well, Michaela and I, once again, we got the intel, but this is a platform that basically has a good performance culture. In fact, they have performance teams across several of their products, and we can see the results right here. Now, Michaela, you had mentioned in some of our conversations that you do hear a lot from your customers about Core Web Vitals.
Yeah, I mean, I can promise you that I have not gone on a single call or talked to any Catchpoint web page test user that isn't prioritizing Core Web Vitals and speed in general. So that means not only are the people that are in that tool every single day trying to improve these web pages are focused on it, that means it goes all the way up to the executive level because you're reporting on these metrics too. So every single company, whether it be banks, retail, insurance, anything, everybody cares about Core Web Vitals. It's kind of crazy.
Absolutely. And of course, in a back to school environment, you're having a sale, a promotion, or some kind of like, a flash event. You want to make sure that everything is smooth online so you can have that great experience, so that you can have your customers check right out. Now, as I move slides here, pardon me, obviously, when it comes to, the website experience and web page tests, which is, again, the gold standard, we will surface some of that information for you. Now, here's a quick example. We can see that, we have a particular site with an LCP of 9.71, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is that we will have all that information for you to take back and make some adjustments needed be. Now, as we move forward, I quoted someone from the sports industry, and I'm going to quote someone else who says, I don't really like fast websites. His name is no one. Everyone wants to have a fast website, a quick experience. And at the end of the day, speed matters. So to have a fast and friction-free experience, you want to make sure that you're on top of your metrics at all times. So I'll give you a quick example here. Here we're looking at a page performance summary. And we have some of the basic metrics that we like to service for you to sort of like start to paint that picture. If I go back to some of those three platforms that we were looking at earlier, 3 out of the 4 had relatively failing time to first bytes. And in fact, the data was showing that out of the 3, 15%, only 50% were displaying good time to first bytes, which is, I think, 700 milliseconds. So once again, we can see that A, either they don't have a good performance culture, B, they're probably not monitoring any of their metrics, or C, all of the above. All right. So these are very important moments in creating that environment so that your users could come in, buy the item, and check right out. Now, that being said, we want to make sure that we have continuous improvements on industry standard metrics like the Core Web Vitals. Ain't that right, Michaela?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical to continuously test and monitor key metrics like this over time, not only to understand what your performance looks like in general, but also to be able to catch any of those performance regressions. So any of those performance bottlenecks, you'll be aware of them so you can eliminate them and ensure the best experience for your users. Something we say a lot is that you can't really improve what you're not monitoring and measuring. So just taking that first step is a great way to ensure that you're not going to lose any of those customers due to a poor website.
Absolutely. And, speaking of poor websites, we want to get into an example right here. And, we talked about continuous testing. Um, we are going to talk about the importance of testing. Now, this is a real live example that I personally went through. Now, I know Janae, a coworker, is somewhere in the chat, so she's going to appreciate this one. I was, Janae and I are both runners, you know, and I was like shopping for shoes. And I got to this website, and I basically, this is where I was adding to cart. And suddenly I had this pop up saying, "Hey, hold on." And there was like a 30-second countdown. And I'm like, what is going on here? And by the end, eventually I got the screen that says, an unexpected error occurred. Please try again in a few seconds. Thank you for your patience. And I was like, 30 seconds? Well, guess what? That was 35 seconds more than I had. You know, we do not have this kind of patience online. The data is there. There's a classic data point about 3 seconds, et cetera, et cetera. Lose 50% of your users. But this is the importance of testing. Why? Well, I discovered that this was an issue that was happening only in the Safari browser, because I tried this in I think it might have been Chrome or something else, and it was working. So here we can see that someone may have just done some surface testing, but sometimes you absolutely have to go a little deeper. And that's why we have also at Web Page Test, you can replicate the user journey right through to the add to cart and the checkout. So this is some testing that had not taken place. And this is why, we always say you can test, you can track, and you can improve the user experience and performance over time by making sure that you're on top of these user experiences. Let me see. Let's go to our next slide. Oh, this one of my favorites. I know, again, Michaela, some of the customers that you deal with, they mentioned these kind of networks and geos.
Yeah, so your users aren't coming from one place. They're coming from multiple different networks, connection speeds, and different geographies. So just starting with connection speeds, you might have users that are coming from a faster 4 or 5G connection, where you also might have other users that are coming from a slower 3G connection. So you don't want to mistake of only testing those faster speeds, because then you're losing out on that business from any users that are coming from that slower connection. And at the end of the day, you want to have a good user experience for everyone, no matter where they are, which also brings us over to those different locations. You could have users that are accessing your data from across the country or from across the globe. You want to make sure that no matter where your users are or where they're coming from, how they're accessing your data, that they have a good user experience and have the ability to seamlessly check out.
Absolutely. And, we are talking about back to school. I want to share a quick little story. We have a shot of a classroom right here. A few years ago, I gave a presentation and we were talking about, I think I was talking about images and, performance and compression, et cetera, et cetera. And afterwards, someone came up to me and really thanked me for the talk and said that, and shared this quick story. She was responsible for a sort of like education platform that they were building. Cool. And it was meant mostly for North America. And she said out of nowhere, they were getting students from overseas, and in particular, India. And some of the students in India were complaining or letting them know that they were having trouble downloading some of the content, and especially around images. And she said she was shocked and taken aback because A, she didn't realize they were getting students from overseas, and B, did not realize that they were having performance issues. So, she kind of shared that story with me and let me know that she was really taking, some of these notes back with her to work. Once again, we have a situation where monitoring, especially from different geos, would have come in very handy. And this is why, again, as Michaela shared, your customer may come from any parts of the world, and you want to make sure that they have that seamless experience that you expect in an e-com situation. Again, they might not be buying an actual product, but they might be paying for a service like an education platform and trying to learn. So again, these moments are extremely important in setting up your e-com environment. Now, we have advanced configurations over at Web Page Test. And this is one of the key features that makes Web Page Test such a fantastic solution over at Catchpoint. So, we can, pardon me, sorry, we can, test from, say, Paris to, I don't know, Portland, from, Melbourne to Milan. We can test from, Sao Paulo to Shanghai. We can determine, you can determine, pardon me, using this application, this solution, where you want to test from. Also, we can create with fine detail the kind of networks that your users are seeing. As you can tell from this chart, or this screenshot, pardon me, we can determine the bandwidth up or down. We can determine the latency. We can pick the packet loss, because these are things that really happen on a network when you're on the internet. So that being said, let's get back to the idea that we can paint a comprehensive picture of your users with a variety of user devices, network speeds, conditions, round trip times, et cetera, et cetera. These are very important when you're testing, because you want to make sure that you can see and understand what your users are experiencing. Now, obviously, with the API, we can take that even a little further. Beyond the fact that we can get into dashboards, which Michaela will get into in a hot second, but you can set up some alerts. You can set up situations where you may want to create, like, I don't know, oh my god, I'm losing my mind right here.
Performance budget.
Yes, performance budget. Oh my god, where did that come from? Thank you. Performance budgets are going to be very important. So, for example, that person who had the education platform with a performance budget, she might have been like, hey, you know what? These images are too large because we have people from overseas. Let's make sure they come in within this kind of budget, because that's what's required for them to be able to download the content from a different network with different speeds. And Michaela, you had mentioned as well some of the conversations you had with some of your clients around some of these dashboards.
Yeah, so something that I figured out is that visualizing performance looks different at every company. There's certain teams that might have a bunch of different brands that they monitor. So they might have some sort of dashboard where they're looking at all of those brands, seeing if everything's good or bad. There's also different teams that might be focused on key campaign pages or key web pages on one site that they're looking maybe specific core web vitals, or those different performance budgets for, say, page speed, for example. So no matter how you visualize that performance is completely up to you and your team and what's most important. However, at the end of the day, every company needs to be continuously testing and improving those web pages to ensure the best experiences for users. Because like we said, the internet's a complex beast. And if you're not, continuously looking at it and keeping an eye on that, you're going to fall behind your competitors.
Absolutely. There are a lot of moving parts under the hood, and you want to make sure that you have some control as much as possible on all, if not the key parts. All right, so let's keep moving forward here. Now, something else that came up, and we mentioned earlier, and especially getting back to some of those e-com platforms, we saw that out of the 4 platforms, one was doing extremely well, and 3 of them were like, if not just poor in general. And part of that is the fact that one created a culture of performance. They understood how important performance was, from like just an e-com level, or just even just a basic user experience level. And it translated into some of the data that they had out there. Again, doing extremely well on many of the metrics that matter out there, and we can see that probably in their sort of like checkout flow and user experiences. So I know that, Michaela, you've had a lot of these great conversations with some of your clients around the culture performance.
Yeah, so some some teams have that culture of performance implemented and it works really well for them, like we see in that chart. But I've also heard from a lot of customers that it can be really hard to create that culture of performance. And it's something that a lot of teams tend to actually struggle with. But at the end of the day, it's not just developers that are focused on web performance, speed, etc. There's SEO specialists that need to focus on core web vitals for those search engine rankings and increasing conversions, which means that not just engineering cares about it, but that means marketing cares about it too. So performance across different departments, but also, again, it goes all the way to the top. All of these metrics and all of these conversions are being reported at the executive level. So if you don't have everybody on board in that culture of performance, you are going to fall behind. And if you want to avoid losing that revenue and impact on your brand reputation due to poor performance, you need to make sure that everybody's aligned with that.
Absolutely. And, I love that you mentioned the brand reputation because, people tend to forget how important that is. I'll give you a quick example. I used to go to one particular site, an e-com site, and just kind of browse. And, I did it in part because I knew how snappy and fast the site was. And, I don't know if this was sort of like baked in now, like, because I would just do this out of boredom, like, hey, let me just take a look and, see what I could spend my money on today. And, but these things matter. And, again, you may not realize it, folks, but, people do discuss how fast your site is. They get annoyed at a slow site, and they may not say how much they love a fast site, but they will let you know when a site is slow and it becomes like cumbersome. Right. And I see a comment right here. I think it was Danielle. The most difficult thing to do, I guess, was that about the culture performance? Because if that's what you were commenting on, I absolutely do agree. So yeah, that was in all a sort of walkthrough in what we feel is very important when it comes to ecom in our back to school themed special today, sold in 6 seconds, because we want to make sure, or Michaela and I want to make sure that we can widen your avenue to revenue. You want to make sure that you make as much of this money as you can, because you have the product. You want to make sure that people can kind of come in, pick the product, not be faced with a 30-second delay, just so that I'm being told to kind of like try again when I could have been on a different site and checking right through and getting my product delivered to me immediately. So that being said, before we go any further, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We are going to launch a poll as well, which I'm going to share right now. I think I just have to click open. Is that right, Michaela? I think so. All right. So I'm just going to open up the poll right now so that everyone can kind of like get into that. But I do want to make sure that we, if there are some questions out there, that we open it up to the audience here. If you have any questions, you can either put it in the chat, or I think there's like a Q&A page as well, which I see there are no questions there. Okay. Now, another thing that I'll go back and mention, because I want to make sure that we had enough time, and since we do, I'll go back up and talk about this. If we go back to that page with the platforms, I want to kind of share some additional data. Yeah, this one right here. Now, something else that I'd noticed in sort of like the research, 3 out of the 4 platforms, again, the 3 that weren't doing well, I think I mentioned they didn't have good TTFB. Also, 2 of them had poor LCP as well. All right. And again, not to sort of like bag on them, because I know LCP is actually a bit of a challenging metric to master. And, many developers have problems with LCP. But this, again, gets back to the culture performance, the ability to monitor some of the key metrics, user experience and performance in one. And these are the kind of results that you want to make sure that you kind of avoid, right? We want you to pass when it comes to back to school. You want that passing grade.
And also, I see that we have a question in the chat from Theo here, which, Henri, I think that you'll have good insight on this. So, as you know, Core Web Vitals FID is being sunset, and we're introducing INP within the next year or so. And Theo asked, do you have any initial thoughts for SEOs and devs working to optimize for INP?
Great question, Theo. And it's funny because we're actually working on a bit of a project, sort of to discuss SEO in more detail. But certainly, when it comes to the INP, it was very important because they felt that the FID did not reflect what was actually going on. It was like kind of like a snapshot. So, my thoughts in terms of like working to optimize INP, absolutely. And I will say this, you do have some time to kind of look into it because it's not until I think sometimes sometime around March of next year where the switch is officially on. It's like boom, INP is like fully integrated into sort of like the vitals and is a metric that we are absolutely going to keep an eye on. I think right now we're in this sort of like trial test period. Like it's kind of official, but we want to make sure, or at least Google wants to make sure that for the next year, they can collect a bit more data to make sure that they're making the right decision. So in terms of optimizing for INP, Theo, I do believe it's an absolute thumbs up. You should definitely look into it so that when things really become official in parts of next year, like I said, around March, you're not, caught off guard. So you have this sort of period right now where you can start to like optimize and really research what needs to be done. So both SEO and developers should be doing that as we speak.
Yeah, and one way that you can do it too is if you do run a test on web page test, we do collect that INP data with Crux data if you're testing from Chrome. So that's something you can use to help that as well. I see another question coming in from Sarish. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. A major issue I've seen with e-commerce websites is the use of a lot of third parties.
Hey, absolutely. Who doesn't want a party? And Michaela, yes, third parties are an issue. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to quote a friend of mine who works at a major, well, actually, I'll call it Condé Nast, a major publisher. And they'll tell you that it's not about eliminating third parties. It's basically working with the third party as much as possible, because there are some you really can't do without. Some, not saying that you should avoid them, but you might be able to have a sort of like a different loading pattern for a third party, because some third parties don't really need to be on an external domain. You could sort of like pull those back in, but some you absolutely cannot. So it's a matter of like, again, measuring the impact of the third party, seeing where it's come from, what is the result of potentially having different loading patterns for this third party, and then collecting the results and seeing what's best for your site, right? Because again, you'll have, so I don't know, if you look at a news publisher, they might have a ton of third parties for various reasons, but as an e-com, maybe there's some you could do without. Maybe there's some you can pull back into your domain. But again, you will not be able to make that kind of assessment without any particular testing done over time, so you can see the effect. Because there are studies out there where, again, third parties aren't necessarily bad for you, but if you pull them in to your own domain, a little better. And again, it might be a loading pattern you want to use that will be less impactful as a third party. So it's hard to give like a definite answer, but a lot of it is around sort of the testing and the research and collecting the data and making these decisions thereafter. Thank you for that question, Sorish. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Let me see here. Do we have any more questions? I don't see it. Okay, the poll is still going. The poll is still open, folks. So if you want to vote, if you haven't voted, please do. Is there anything, Michaela, that you've seen in so your travels that maybe we've not covered today?
I mean, I think that I would just reiterate the fact that your users are coming from everywhere, and they're also not just coming from those different connection speeds and locations, but they're also coming from those different devices, like you mentioned. I know that earlier when we were talking about this webinar in general, I mentioned to you that my dad doesn't even use a laptop besides his work laptop. If he's buying something online, it's from his phone. So if you're only focusing on desktop and you're not looking at mobile too, you're going to run into problems where, say, my dad isn't able to buy XYZ that he's trying to buy. So just keeping in mind that your users are just coming from everywhere, and it's important to not just focus on one specific connection, one specific location, even if that's where you think that's where most of your users are. You got to be testing from everywhere, because do you really want to leave all that money on the table? We said $30 billion. Do you want to leave 1 billion? Probably not. So just
Yeah,
making sure that you're continuously testing from all of those different locations is super important.
absolutely. And thanks for that reminder. And I remember when we had that conversation, you had mentioned your dad, my dad as well. My dad thinks he's like a brilliant, internet person. He knows how to surf the web, and he's on an older iPad. I'm like, okay, dad. But very important, as Michaela said, the ability to test from different locations, different browsers, different devices. Again, I think I may have said this, and maybe I didn't, but shout outs to Josh, by the way, who I think I saw in the chat. If
Yeah,
he's
he's
around
here.
here, yeah, awesome. Akamai, Premier CDN, good friends of Catchpoint and Web Page Test. They have this open source data set called the RUM archive, and they sort of post some of the data they have in terms of like what they see on the net. And first of all, their mobile split is 40-60, 40% iPhone users and 60% not nice people, aka Android users, right? So you want to make sure that, again, in my example, I could not check out somehow using a Safari browser. You want to make sure you're testing properly, at every point, so that that you are not leaving money on the table, because I could not check out. I could not buy those shoes, you know. And now here I am talking about you because I couldn't buy the shoes. You want positive experiences. You don't want your brand reputation to get flushed. But I'm a nice guy. I'm not going to flush it. All right. I think we have another question here, maybe. No. Let me go. There's so many tabs here. I want to make sure I get everything covered. No, it doesn't look like it. So
I don't think I see anymore.
yeah, I don't see anything. I don't think. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? Maybe we'll just wrap it up here. We want to thank, first of all, everyone for coming out and joining us for this. We'll be doing a few more of these, these conversations, and not so much webinars, but they're conversations, open forums for people to come in and hang out and listen to us talk about, the pertinent things when it comes to performance, the web user experiences, et cetera, et cetera. I just made a post on LinkedIn. Josh, a little note here, using iOS shortcuts run performance snippets. Interesting. Okay, Josh, I'll have to check that out. But that being said, Michaela and I can be, reached out on socials. I think, Michaela, you're on LinkedIn. Is that correct?
Absolutely. If you look up my name,
Oh,
I should pop right up.
awesome. And if you go to Michaela's LinkedIn, you'll probably see me tagged in there somewhere as well. So by all means, get in touch with us if you have any questions. Thereafter, we'll be more than happy to answer them. I do believe that we are going to get this recording out to you at some point by email. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, we'll be sending the recording afterwards. So we'll be sure to get that over to you, and it'll be over to you by tomorrow, is what I'm being told. So will be great if you want to share it with anybody too. Feel free. And as Henry said, if you ever have any questions or just want to talk about web performance in general, obviously we love talking about it. So feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. And again, if you have any questions, you could reach out to us that way, or if you go to catchpoint.com, and you'll be able to get some more information and reach any of us through that portal. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Michaela, we'll catch up in a hot minute. And folks, make sure you're smooth on the user experience level. Let's go.
Pass that
and
test.
secure that bag.
Thanks, y'all.
Exactly. Cheers.
Bye.